Hello everyone and welcome to the Madison College Chef Demo Series presented by Vollrath. My name is Kyle Cherek and to my right is esteemed American chef Rick Tramonto. Hey buddy.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Good to see you.
So great to have you in this kitchen.
Thank you very much. And what a kitchen it is.
Right?
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
They've got it going on.
Who?
So you've cooked in some great kitchens.
I have.
You've cooked in some challenging kitchens.
Certainly have.
And you've turned out great food in I would say pretty much all of them.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's been quite the journey.
Yeah.
It certainly has.
How does this, does it bring back any memories? It's not quite the true kitchen, but there's some similarities, the setup and the stainless.
No,
and
for sure. I mean, you know what's amazing is the disciplines of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Like things are P-touched and labeled and, you know, very methodical and, you know, very thoughtful is the word I want to use. And there's really a thought process behind where the spoons are and where the china is, and it's, you know, it's spotless, and you can just feel that it's a really thoughtful, looked after kitchen, you know? And there's a lot of love going on.
So when you were sitting in that meeting with Richard Melman and Gail, talking about True, bringing this dream to life, and you wanted Armani suits for the waiters and Limoges china and, you know, great glassware and so forth, and you sketched out what the kitchen would be. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that then it would be emulated in Ratatouille years later?
Right.
But I mean, kitchen design is, there's chefs that can cook in kitchens, and then there's chefs that can design and cook in kitchens, you being the former.
Yeah.
So how do you approach a space like that when when you could pretty much whatever you wanted, with the exception of moving walls?
Yeah, I think it's really about, the journey up to that. Mm-hmm. You've worked in so many kitchens, you've staged, you've traveled the world, you've always taken note of what makes my job harder, what makes my job more seamless, and, you know, there's always that word called budget. Yeah. And when you don't have one, you know, you can really be a blue sky thinker in a lot of ways to be able to say, hey, you know, we did Trio with $200,000, we did True for $6.5 million. So at the end of the day, if you're building a $50,000 kitchen or $1 million kitchen, it is all relevant as far as toys and layout and custom stainless and all of that. But we really thought through every area of, we're going to have an amuse station because I just wrote an amuse book. We're going to have a full separate pastry kitchen for Gail. We're going to have a chocolate, you know, kitchen. We're going to, you know, everything became very methodical and being very compartmentalized to be able to say fish station, meat station, veg station, app station, 3 guys per station, because we did all tasting menus. So when you're saying to yourself, we're going to do 150 covers a night, but everybody's having 10 courses, that's 1,000 plates roughly, and that's night after night after night when you've been that blessed to be sold out for 4 years in advance, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really this whole energy of how do we do that? How are we going to achieve that? So a lot of thought went into it, a lot of time went into it, and we had the budget. I mean, at the end of the day, we were very blessed to have the budget, and not only in the back of house, but in the front of house of $1 million art collection and Versace china and custom glassware and all of that.
So you're a very honest chef. You've told your life story through Scars of the Chef. You've been very forthright about your path, your journey, your failings, your triumphs, your struggles, and your food. I mean, you started in fast food, and then you ended up, and still are, being one of the preeminent chefs of fine dining in American culinary tradition. I mean, just that's what it is. But talk about how, as you, like, where is the line between great tools and tricks and things like that in the kitchen, great, you know, equipment, and then just flat old chefness, like really honest, I can cook, you know, well, I can roll out my own doughs.
Yeah, you have to understand that it didn't start with, I want to be a chef. It started with, I need a job. I mean, I really, truly need a job. My dad has gone, I mean, paint the picture. My dad has gone to prison. It's, you know, 1977. I need a job. Where am I going to get a job? I'm going to leave high school in the 11th grade. I'm going to have to go work in a gas station, or I'm going to have to go work in a fast food restaurant, or I'm going to have to go maybe be an apprentice for a plumber, all of which are fine. there just happened to be this restaurant opening down the street of where I lived that was a new restaurant at the time in 1977 that served square burgers. Interesting. You know, you go knock at the back door and you have a gentleman named Dick Fox answer the back door, who is still to this day the largest franchisee in the world of the Wendy's franchises, and a guy named Dave Thomas. And Dave had an amazing story, and I was able to go in and sit down and fill out an application, and it was the first time anybody ever really said, I'm going to give you a shot. You have zero skill set to do this, you have zero education to do this, but I'm going to give you an opportunity. And you know, I remember struggling that day and having these guys actually help me fill out an application.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I mean, if you think about the timeline, I still didn't know how to read very well. I certainly didn't know how to spell. You know, there was certainly all these challenges to be able to say, I have to survive here in my life. My mom worked at the city school district as a cleaning lady and a lunchroom lady. I'm an only child. We had lost everything after my dad went to jail, and we dug in.
What have I got to lose?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm going to learn how to cook. That's what I'm going to do. And I felt at that time that it spoke to me. It still spoke to me because I understood it. I grew up in a relatively, you know, big Italian family, traditional Italian family, even though I'm an only child, but tons of cousins. Both of my grandparents lived with us at one time or another. So lots of history and tradition just by happenstance. And it's like, okay, let's see if I can do this. Well, 3 years in, 2 years in, what's next? Okay, you know, you learn fast food for a couple of years. It's like, well, let's go to a steakhouse, and you do that for a couple of years. And how do you get into a real kitchen? Well, you have to knock on some doors, and that's going to be the line of the message today. Is yes, people have to answer that door, but you have to be the one to go knock on it.
Right.
So if you can muster up the courage and you have the gut to start knocking on doors and say, can I come in and learn from you? Can I? And you'll get a lot of doors slammed in your face, and you'll get a lot of no's, but at the end of the day, I knew I needed to move to a major metropolitan city growing up in upstate New York. So the goal still was, how do I get to Manhattan? 81, 82, we had the opportunity to meet some friends who were moving to Manhattan, and you know, kissed my mom goodbye and moved to New York City.
And you cooked for some great chefs there.
Yeah, you know, I got to work with Alfred Portali, who was just an amazing mentor, and
Patrick Clark during that time?
Patrick Clark at the Tavern on the Green, and just a lot of good. I was really blessed to have to fall into a lot of good mentorships.
Right.
And guys that really cared about teaching.
Yeah.
Right.
So as you innovated to change your voice, your chef's voice, when you were traveling in Europe, cooking, you know, that sort of thing, the New York chefs, of course, were there moments where like, gosh, if I had this equipment, I could do that? Or I just need to learn more skills and then I'm going to find the right things that'll help me do that? No,
but, you know, along the way, you start to find what works for you. You know, if you're buying, you know, great Vollrath stuff, if you're going, hey, I want to be able to work on a jade piano or work on a Montague line.
Yeah.
You know, those things certainly started to help.
Yeah.
But you start to get spoiled because the level of kitchens that I was working in was, you know, state of the art.
Right.
And it was really hard to then go work in a kitchen that didn't have, you know, Vollrath stuff or didn't have great ovens or things like that. So I think that was a huge learning curve, just like technique. If you're learning technique, if you're learning ingredients, if you're learning equipment, and it just all came, I mean, it was such an overload of information over a 12-year period.
Right.
To be able to come out of that and go, okay, I think I have a voice. I think I understand what I want to do. Now I just got to figure out how am I going to do it?
How am I
Where
going
am I
to
going
use
to
these
do
chisels
it? That's
on
right.
this marble? Yeah. But I love the story with Trio that, you know, the floor collapses, you lose $20,000 to just reinforcing a kitchen floor.
Yeah.
Your budget for dishes and things is out the window,
Yeah.
and you're at like Builder's Square, I think.
Yeah, Builder's Square.
Builder's Square, and you look at the tile, and you're like, this is an innovation. I can plate on this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Because that's how I see the world.
That's right.
And they're $4 instead of
Gotta love it, right?
whatever
$100
China.
a plate, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing with looking at a medicine cabinet and looking at glass shelves in a medicine cabinet that were rectangle glass. And I'm like, we could plate on this. Or mirrors, pieces of mirror. Hey, this is a mirror that people would hang in their bathroom. Let's take it and use it. So all of these things for, I mean, I hate to say this because I feel like I'm very spoiled, but, we had a $100,000 China budget when we opened True.
Yeah.
We had probably $1,000 China budget
Right.
when we opened Trio.
Right.
But the results were the same.
Yeah.
That's the beauty.
Yeah.
What was on the plate was still 4 stars at Trio, was still 4 stars at
Right.
True, was still Rally Chateau Gourmand. It was still, Best Chef Food and Wine. It was still James Beard Awards. It was still about the center of the plate. It was still about building flavors and flavor profiles. It was still about technique. It had nothing to do, look, this is a luxury. And I keep telling these kids in here, embrace this, because when you go to your next place, you may be working on a garbage can with a cutting board on top.
Right. But that's
okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. You master that.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Many times.
Then you're bulletproof. But it's true. The Trio True leap is, you were cooking at the same level, and Phil Vitale came into Trio and called you one of the 3 best chefs in the Chicago area. And that's when you and Charlie started putting Chicago on the map as an international dining destination. But you were doing it, on a builder supply budget.
Yeah.
But that's why I love cuisine, because the art and the craft have to sit together, not in 2 chairs next to each other, but they have to share butt cheeks on the same chair.
Yeah, no doubt.
And when they do, it's fantastic. I mean, it's just...
It is magic. And, at the time, there was Jean Bonchet, and,
Right.
Everybody, it was the pilgrimage to Le Francais, and it was, Jean Joho, and there was this handful of, but they were all French.
Yeah.
And they were all hardcore French. And, I never forget the first time going to France, me and Gail landing in Paris and running to our meal to Jamenne. And it was Robuchon's restaurant. It was the first time I ever saw an amuse-bouche.
Right.
And we sit down.
And now you have a book about them.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And we we're running to catch this lunch, and all of a sudden the stuff started appearing at the table, and I'm like, Gail, did you order this? And she's like, no. I'm like, I didn't order this. And the waiter comes over and says, this is a gift from the chef. And I'm like, does the chef know who we are? And she's like, no, this is an amuse-bouche. So I just think of that and that first experience and that first journey. And you're right, 5-6 years later, I wrote one of the first amuse-bouche books that still is, relevant today. But I just couldn't make this shit up. It just unfolded in such a beautiful way that I wouldn't change anything.
Right. One of my favorite stories about your path is that when you got back to Chicago, you applied at Le Francais, and he said no because you've got long hair, earrings, and tattoos.
And a blonde mohawk.
And a blonde mohawk. You do not look like someone in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And if he'd hired you, you never would have done Trio.
Not only that, but almost 10 years later, he came into my kitchen to bring personally Paul Bocuse into my kitchen to have dinner. And that was just the biggest honor for me that full circle had actually happened.
And did you tell Bocuse this guy wouldn't hire me 10 years ago?
No, I was at, you know what? It's really funny because I do remember that we were all, working very, we were so busy at that restaurant all the time, and we were just, every day was a struggle to get set up. And I just remember we had this whole table laid out, and we were building torchons, foie gras torchons, and we were rolling them and wrapping them, and Bocuse walks in the door, and with Bonchet and Rich Melman and all these people came in the back door, and he just walks over to the table, didn't even blink. Bocuse just walks over to the table and just looks at the foie gras tureen set up, and he's like, nice job. And it was just like, he just reeked of history and cuisine and technique, and
he's the connection.
Looked around and go, good job. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was one of the greatest validation moments in your life, right?
You turn to Gail and say, I'm going to go home now. That's all I need.
No.
That's all I need.
No.
So let's talk about trends. How do you feel, where do you feel food's going, cuisine's going? How do you sniff them out, or basically, because you still create them?
Yeah. Again, the whole trend piece is always so subject, and it's always very taboo in some ways for me. But it's really, where am I traveling? What am I seeing? And, I'm loving Indian food right now. I'm loving, the whole, like Shia is Israeli food, and, certainly loving cooking at home more, and teaching my kids like the history of my heritage, which is Italian, and my dad was Napolitan, and my mom was from Abruzzi, and there's great history when you dig deep into your history and your culture and your where your family is from. So I really enjoy that. But as far as trends, there's so much like great food happening, but in half the time. Mm-hmm. So whether it's a food truck, whether
really
it's but the ingredients are, kicking it up. The techniques are still there, but it's this whole like pomp and circumstance kind of shedding. But that worries me because I'm a guy that loves pomp and circumstance when I cook. So for me, losing the fine dining aspect of anything would be a travesty. So I'm still trying to preserve a lot of that as I maneuver, like in New Orleans and with Restaurant Revolution, and looking at some of the great, amazing fine dining restaurants that are still being created and evolving in this country. It's very, very special. But, people are going very simple and delicious and mainstream, and if I can get the most incredible barbecue in a food truck on my lunch break, or an incredible homemade Italian sausage with killer bread, that's awesome.
I knew you were a great chef, but I truly knew how great a chef you were when I ate your and John's food at Revolution. Because, you created the caviar ladder, for goodness sake, right? Or staircase.
Yep.
Excuse me. You created the caviar staircase. So to take that erudition of fine dining and then meld it with John's low country cooking, which is, it's the most, it's what's everything that's unctuous and fabulous about peasant food from that region. And the two of you fused your superpowers together, and it was literally the most delicious meal that year I had had.
Oh, thank you.
But it took me to places that I didn't know, and I'm overexposed in this, as we are. I am overexposed in this, eat a lot of places, try a lot of food, have a lot sent out to me. Very grateful about that, but it took me to places I'd never been. Yeah. And it was a true journey.
And me too, because I had no business being in New Orleans or South Louisiana other than John Foles. And, John is the iconic, historical, legend-telling chef. He's somebody that grew up in the swamps of Louisiana. He is the true swamp people. And he's been able to articulate the, he calls it the swamp floor pantry, by using all the things in South Louisiana and taking the history. I spent a year with John, which I've never had the luxury or the time to do in my life, studying a cuisine, a whole year, without even having to do anything but get in a car and drive to some crazy, gas station in Lafayette, Louisiana to see where they make the best boudin in the back room. Or going alligator hunting in the swamps, or going gigging to get frogs to make the most incredible frog legs on a campfire in the middle of nowhere. So to understand not only the 7 nations of Louisiana and how that became through like John's books and the history of that, and understanding the encyclopedia of Cajun and Creole cuisine and what that lineage means, then taking that and applying it to, you have this old historical thing and this new city kid with John and Rick, and put them on the block. It was very dangerous, because if you mess with somebody's turtle soup recipe or you mess with somebody's gumbo recipe, there's a problem. So how are we going to navigate that? Well, John kept us on the rails, and we have a great saying: every kitchen really needs a definitive palate. That's why a lot of restaurants that have 2 chefs don't work, because one of them has to be the definitive palate.
Well, chef means leader. Someone's got to be the leader.
So for me, it was this salt level that I kept missing, because my food it's seasoned and it's high acid and it has multiple levels of flavor. But when you're in South Louisiana, there's a lot of salt going on. There's a lot of seasoning going on. There's a lot of spice going on. I didn't grow up like that.
Yeah.
So I had to now take a step back and humble myself as a chef and go, John's the definitive palate. This is his world. This is his cuisine. It's like if I was going to go to China or Tokyo or Spain and was working with one of the most iconic chefs of those eras, I have to step back and now be the student.
Right.
But as I'm being the student and understanding those history lessons, those flavor profile lessons, now when I come out on the other side 12 months later, I have a voice
Yeah.
and I have something to say. That's why it worked.
What a great lesson in humility, too. Yeah. There are not that many chefs that Food and Wine, James Beard for Service, $6 million restaurant, like over all the stuff that you've done, that would be able to step back into themselves and say, I'll listen to your food.
Well, where do you go from here? Like we always have that
Yeah.
saying. It's like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
What is next? I don't know. What's next? What's next? So unless you keep either reinventing or you keep the journey moving or you stop and do something totally different, like, okay, I'm going to go paint. I'm going to go do music. Well, I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that. I wanted to continue cooking and learning and moving forward in this craft that I dedicated my whole life. You know, I never even had a paper route. I know most of you are like, what's a paper route? But I never even had a paper route growing up.
Right.
I've cooked my whole life. I've been in environments of four walls my whole life, 38 years this year. I don't really know anything else. And maybe that's the scary part of like, I don't know what else I would do. I don't even know if I can do anything else. This is what I do, right?
Yeah.
I dedicated a whole life to this. So why now feel that I'm done? Why not keep going and go, okay, I'm gonna now, I don't want to be Rick Tramonto today or tomorrow or this year. I want to go learn from John Vols and be in the hidden background and come out a whole other chef.
Version of Rick Tramonto.
Because now the toy box gets bigger, the repertoire gets bigger.
Well, the name of the
Now I'm
restaurant
ready.
is Revolution, meaning one full turn.
That's
Love
right.
that. Yeah. So you're a young chef, or you're an old chef, but it's your first restaurant, second restaurant. You got a tight budget. How do you make those decisions between, you want quality stuff, right? These are your workhorses. You're going to depend on them.
That's right.
Yeah, but then you can't, it's not endless, you know?
Definitely not endless. So then you start to say, hey, what am I really, you know, what needs to be the workhorses, you know? It's the rondos, it's the pot and pans, it's the sheet trays, it's the six pans, the eighth pans, the hotel pans. Those are the ones that, you know, I think you'd be foolish to skimp on. And if you're going to step out of the box and say, well, I want the best, I want to go get a whole set of Vollrath stuff for that, and I'll look other places to deal with, that's the way to go. But your whisks and all, for me, it really truly is, you know, it's about the small wares. I mean, you can buy the tanks and you can buy the stoves and you're going to slam the oven doors all day long, but I could still go back to, you know, Trio or True and everything on those smallware shelves because of the quality of the stainless, the gauge of the stainless, the rolled edges, just the amount of beating that takes every day, all day, set up and tear down, set up and tear down. I think that's where money is really well spent.
So the nuances like you're putting in your food on that product, basically, it sounds like.
And it just, you know, there's such a pride in it. There's a pride in the brand, there's a pride in the vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I love asking chefs this question. What's your, like, bike chain spray? You know, like you're a professional biker, you got all the stuff, you're sponsored by whoever, but the thing that makes your day go is like this stupid, simple $4 lubricant that, you know what I mean? Like, what's your Phillips screwdriver? What's your chef thing that you're just like,
yeah,
there's
definitely a couple of them. I mean, you know, I remember when the microplane first came out.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I remember when, you know, the Vitamix first came out.
Yeah.
But today, after all these years, I'm setting up and I asked for a cutting board and they brought the cutting board over and then they brought these little rings over and they start putting the rings on the stainless steel.
What is like silicone or something?
Yeah, it's like a top to a mason jar, like a canning jar, and they put the cutting board on top.
But it didn't slip.
And it was perfect, and I'm like, and it didn't move, and I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I think of this?
Right.
Like I was ready to like do my towel and, you know, do old school. So this is the stuff that changes your life. It's right here.
Well, it's like your day is so much simpler, and in the back of your mind, you're not thinking, is this cutting board going to slip? That's what I mean. It's like the bike chain spray, where you're like, I'm going to cruise, and this thing is not going to, trip up while I'm finishing the Tour
And
de
the
France.
other thing I'm a total geek about are stainless steel bowls. Like, there's something very sexy about a stainless steel bowl that is made right, that when you put your hands in it and you're tossing salads or you're making tartars, it's like the rolled edges and the feel of it and the gauge of it. And I had shared this with many, many, many chefs, is that, there's something about an incredible, well-made, heavy-duty stainless steel bowl that I can't live without. And I have stacks of them. And I have them in my house, I have them in my restaurants, but it's the most simplest, utilitarian thing.
Yeah.
But grab a crappy stainless steel bowl and make a salad, and grab a Vollrath or something super duper, and
you
it's like day
you
and
and
night.
my wife are soulmates there, because she'll be doing a big thing and she's like, "Where are my bowls?" And I'll say, "Just let me wash them," just because. And she can look out of the corner of her eye and know that is not the bowl that she was. We have 4.
Yeah, no.
And those are hers.
No, I have 15. If I bring another bowl home, my wife's throwing me out. I have so much cooking equipment in my house, it's just insane. So, and it just stacks of it.
Yeah, you're very blessed.
I don't have one of these though.
You're
So I'm taking.
going home. Thanks, Chef.